Okay, so we have a few viewers, so I will welcome everybody to our next Genesis of Seven author talk. This one is called the League of Librarians author chat and book club talk. I am joined tonight with 6 amazing librarians, and we're kind of all spread across the U.S. Most of us are here in Colorado, but we have we have a librarian from New Jersey and one from Illinois, so we're all over the place. So I just want to give a quick overview of tonight. So this chat will be roughly 2 hours. The first part will be more like an author talk with me, where each librarian will be able to ask me their questions and I'll answer them. And then the second half will be more of a book club chat where we all kind of pose questions to the whole group and everyone gets a chance to answer. And I just want to acknowledge Bewitching Book Tours, because this whole live event is part of my book tour going on right now with Bewitching Book Tours for the month of October. So this is part of my tour with them. And I will say we are doing a giveaway tonight. I'm going to post the giveaway link in the comments. So that's going in there now. Tonight, the giveaway is a Empyrean Trilogy tote bag, signed paperback of the Genesis of Seven, and a lot of the other little swag like the pins and the pen and the passport and all that. So if you want to enter, that's up. And if you have any questions, you could post them in the comments. I'll try and monitor them throughout. Otherwise, we'll try and get to some at the end. And now I'm going to introduce all our librarian guests. So I'm going to read their bios one by one. I just did it in alphabetical order by first name, so make it a little bit easier. But here we go. So first up is Courtney. Courtney is a Patron Experience Associate at Columbine Library in Jefferson County. Previously, she worked as a library paraprofessional at Bear Creek High School. Courtney is a native of Colorado and attended the University of Denver. And I'm just going to tell people how I'm connected with everybody. So me and Courtney went to school together during our undergrad, and we actually went to Italy together for one of our art history classes. So we have traveled globally together in another country. Next up is Jenny. Originally from the Chicago area, Jenny studied marketing at the University of Illinois before pursuing a master's degree in library science at the University of Denver. She now serves as a teen librarian in the western suburbs of Chicago and reads whenever she can. And so me and Jenny also briefly went to school together for a period of time. And the first time I actually went to ALA was in Chicago, and Jenny was the best tour guide because I had never been to Chicago before. Next up is Kimmy. So Kimmy DePinto, pronouns she, her, hers, has worked 13 years in customer service, 7 of which have been in libraries. Her enjoyment of customer service led her to her first library job as a library associate, where she developed a passion for supporting and working with teens. This inspired Kimmy to take the next step and pursue an MLIS at the University of Denver. Soon after, she began her journey as a teen librarian. During this time, Kimmy chaired YALSA's Best Fiction for Young Adults Blogging and Selection Committee, as well as co-chaired the Colorado Teen Literature Conference Committee. Next, Kimmy centralized large event planning and operations by taking on the new role of district-wide events and experience supervisor. In this position, she was the supervisor of the pop-up library, the events and experience staff, as well as the facilitator and project manager of the Summer Reading Adventure Committee, Teen Tour, and an annual Signature Author Series committee. Kimmy recently began a new position in a new library district as the Patron Experience Supervisor. Kimmy's time outside of work is spent with her partner and 2 wonderful pups that keep them very busy. She enjoys yoga, coffee, Harry Potter, Doctor Who, and reading teen fantasy and realistic fiction that highlight diverse and inclusive voices. Kimmy has a great passion for travel, as she loves learning about new cultures and, of course, food. So me and Kimmy are connected because she was like one of my first ever beta readers for the Genesis of Seven. So she saw this like really super early on and probably totally different than it is now. But she gave the best advice and comments, and it was really integral in making, I would say, the book better. So thanks to Kimmy for all her hard work all those years ago with helping me with this book. Next is Mary Jo. So Mary Jo Jennings has been the director of Garfield Free Public Library for the past 10 years. She started working at the library in 2000 as a part-timer, was hired full-time in 2008 as a library assistant. In 2009, she earned her master's degree in library science from St. John's University. When Mary Jo was named director, she faced many difficult decisions due to years of budget cuts. Mary Jo worked diligently with city officials to increase funding and apply for grants that would enable infrastructure projects. While staffing has been challenging, Mary Jo has been proactive in anticipation of these changes without interruption to the library. She has created various community outreach programs, a young adults room, resurrected the Friends of the Garfield Library, and worked with donors to establish the Garfield Library Foundation. Previous to family rearing, she was employed by KPMG in Montvale, New Jersey in their computer department. Prior to the company's merger, she worked in Manhattan when they were Pete Marwick in their field support department. Her undergraduate degree from St. John's University Staten Island campus was in computer science with a business minor. It was at SJU she met her future husband and father of her 2 sons. So me and Mary Jo go way, way back. She is my hometown librarian ever since I was very, very little. As she used to say, I was her little pink snowball. So she, yes, gets to claim me as hometown author. And next up is Missy. Missy is a teacher librarian and technology teacher at St. Mary's Academy in Englewood, Colorado. She holds a BA from Fort Lewis College in Classical and Medieval European History, an MLIS from the University of Denver, an MA in Curriculum and Instruction, and a teaching licensure in Secondary Social Studies. The library has always been her haven and the first way she found to travel the world and through time. She believes that the most important reason to read is to develop empathy, and that through empathy we can shape the world as positive agents of change. Missy loves to read, of course, write science fiction and fantasy, hike with her Palpillion Chocho, and go jeeping and camping in the mountains. I hope I got that right. But me and Missy know each other because we've worked together at the library at the University of Denver for many, many years. So that's our background together. And then our last guest is Sara Van Hall. Sara is a patron services technician at Douglas County Libraries in Roxborough. She is a fourth-generation Coloradan who has a BA in history from the University of Northern Colorado and an elementary teaching certificate from Metropolitan State University. She has worked in libraries for 11 years and loves working where the books live. Her genres include romance, fantasy, historical fiction, horror, and nonfiction history books. Her hobbies include photography, costumes, and writing. She is a giant nerd who geeks out over all the pop culture ever. And I can't blame her because I am probably the same giant pop culture nerd. But me and Sara currently work together at Douglas County Libraries, which is how we know each other. So welcome all of you to our chat tonight, and thank you all so much for participating. So I guess we'll kind of jump in and get started with the first half of our chat tonight, which is more of the author talk. So this will just be, each of you have some questions for me. So we'll kind of let everybody get a turn to ask their questions and then I'll answer them. So I think going off of our little outline, first up was Mary Jo.
Yes, I am so intrigued to find out if any of your research has an effect on your own beliefs. Being a librarian, I just don't have one question. I have several follow-ups right into it. Did anything make you question any part of your faith? Or did it make your convictions any stronger?
So I think if I put this up, it's gonna cover Courtney, so I might not do that. But but anyway, so to answer your question, so I would say, so this kind of the whole story really started for me by questioning a lot of what I had learned from my faith and growing up in a Christian church. So I would say that, yeah, it all started with me questioning that. And the main thing that kind of made me what I was questioning was they teach you that, and I kind of touched on this before, but they teach you, God created everything. And so the whole question for me was like, well, if God created everything, then why is there evil? And if there's evil, then why is Satan the one to be the evil one? And so, yes, I would say I definitely had my research definitely made me question some of what I had previously been taught and some of my own beliefs. I think though, kind of, I think I would say it writing this book and doing all that, it probably has made some of the things that I believed in, some of my convictions that I believed in stronger. Um, and I think touching on the research component of things, for me, uh, I think what was really great about the research component was it helps me more than anything to not only answer all the questions that I had, but also to kind of ground the story. Because I mean, there was a part of it that you want a story to be fun and entertaining, but there's another part of it where you really want it to be, especially for this, based on, because it is based on something that I'm pulling from and drawing from. You want it to also be somewhat factual or close to what the story was originally. So research definitely played a big part in kind of balancing out those two things.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, I think I have the next question for you, Sarah. I really appreciated your description of the different heavenly tiers and territories. It was very vivid and unique. Were you basing your descriptions off of research you had done? And then I have some follow-up questions as well. How much of your personal interpretation and imagination went into writing those scenes that you set in heaven?
So, something I haven't touched on yet is, so for me, research isn't just books. I mean, certainly that's a large part of it, both I would say fiction and nonfiction books. But another part of research for me is art. I draw heavily on art. Pop culture is another one. And I guess going with that, just kind of the media you consume, and also kind of just interactions that you have, like out in the world day to day, that all really plays into my research. So I think in terms of when I approached creating Heaven, definitely some of that research helped in creating that realm. The thing that I can think of that comes to mind is the angel hierarchy definitely is something that I learned about through research, and that totally was what I drew upon in terms of structuring Heaven. So that kind of gave me the structure. But then the rest of it was kind of drawing off from my own imagination and interpretation of kind of what I could do with that structure. And I think, if anything, the research helps to give the structure, because you always need a structure to a world, but then kind of jumping off of that with, I guess, the descriptions and all where all the angels fit into that structure was definitely more my interpretation and imagination at play. So it was kind of a little bit of both, hand in hand. Okay. I think Sarah's question is next.
Yes. So, if you look at the lore for Satan's fall, there are several candidates for who he was originally. So how did you decide which archangel you were going to use for Satan before his fall? Because you didn't go with the typical one, the one that almost everybody else uses. So,
right. So the whole, I think, Lucifer Satan thing in my book is definitely different from how other people approach it. And so I picked Samael was his angel name, and then when he falls, he turns into Satan. But I would say why I ultimately went with that was, for me, when I had done my research, a lot of the Samael kind of legends they were the ones that were connected more with Lilith, as opposed to Lucifer. And so because of that, I went that way. And then I knew I couldn't just get rid of Lucifer, though. I mean, he plays a big part in the war, and even in a lot of the myths and legends. So for me, I always knew he was a fallen angel. I never associated him having the whole war, like him being the leader of the instigator of the whole war. So I just it made sense in my head to make him more like, second in command to Satan. So that's kind of where I went with that. But I think even as I was reading other things where they kind of interchangeably use Satan and Lucifer, that, I don't know, for some reason, just it drove me crazy in a little way, because I knew there was a difference between them. So I always made sure that in my book that I did draw that line. So that kind of explains a little bit. Okay. I think Timmy's next.
Yes, there we go. So my question for you is, what made you gravitate towards the overarching discussion in your novel of the dichotomy of good and evil?
So I think for me, right off the bat, I mean, when you're dealing with angels and demons and devils and hell and heaven, there ultimately is going to be this dichotomy of good versus evil associated with all that. But I think why I gravitated towards it was, I don't know, for me, good and evil is like the ultimate battle that there is. So I think really being able to pick at that kind of theme and trope and really kind of twist it or turn it on its head or look at it in different ways was really intriguing to me, which is also kind of part of the reason why it is so significant in my book. What I was also going to say about that was, though, I think for me, I kind of look at everything as, I call it a balance in duality, meaning like you need opposites almost. So you need good and evil, you need dark and light. And so for me, that is a lot of what I play at in this book, is kind of a balance between the two. And I think going into it, that's just something I always thought. So kind of going back to what Mary Jo was saying, that was kind of a conviction I just had. So it just kind of followed into the book with me, which I guess makes sense, because I'm, sometimes you project things onto your writing. So that was just one of them. Okay, I think, we're back to Courtney.
Okay. Were there any authors or books that inspired you to write your own book? And when did you initially have the premise or idea for your story? And did it change drastically from when you first began writing?
So the first part of that, I think I've mentioned this a few times, but it's always worth mentioning again, because I've loved them so much. But Dante, definitely. I read the whole Divine Comedy. Inferno obviously was very much kind of an inspiration for me. I would say his Heaven portion of that book is also very much an inspiration for me. I take his idea of the Empyrean, and I called it my trilogy, because just his description of the Empyrean with the vast multitude of angels, just in my head, I could just see that it was just, so obviously, yes, I'm inspired by that. I could go on and on. But also Paradise Lost by John Milton. That was another big one. And I think those are the two hard hitters, so I'll leave it at that. But then to get to the other part of your question, so the initial, I guess, premise of the story came to me really young, when I was in middle school, and it looked drastically different than the story that it is now. That first story, I was playing around with potentially having I don't know if I want to say a female main character, but more of a female angel. And I think I was just being very influenced on the other books that I was reading at that age, which happened to be a lot of like paranormal romance that have, angels in them. So, and it was always evolving around some kind of female character that was the main person in the book. So I think I was influenced by that. And so my first idea kind of started there. But I know for me, I can't write a book until I have a lot of it fully formed in my head. And I only know when I could start writing if the characters start, like, whole scenes with them start coming to mind, or if they become really dynamic, and it just wasn't working with that first kind of scenario I had. So I knew it wasn't quite what I wanted it to be. So I just kind of let it sit more, and then it just slowly developed into what it is today. And I think letting it sit made me lead to one, kind of the war in heaven, and then also focusing on more of those 7 main archangels. So it definitely did change from where it started. Okay.
All right, I think I'm next. So let me just preface my question by saying it came about because I really liked the idea of angels having different specialties or focuses. I had never really seen it where there were angels of music and medicine. So that was very interesting to me. And then the personalities that came along with all of them based on, their own experiences, but then also their specialties. So my question is, what was your favorite to write?
Which angel specific? Yeah. No, that's
Yes.
totally
Yes. Sorry. Which angel specifically was your favorite?
such a hard question. Because of course I love a little bit of each of them, but my go-to is always Gabriel, because he is the one who started the story for me. That was the one where he was that first fully formed character. And that was the first voice I started writing in. I had a whole prologue with him that didn't make it into the book, but so I would say he was probably my favorite to write. But like I said, each of them in a way have something that I love. And I think what you were touching on, in how they each have their own personality and their kind of own thing that they're associated with, I think that is what kind of makes me like writing each of them, because you get to kind of change around and kind of go into different, I don't know, like little, I don't even, like, I feel like the word is boxes. Like, it's like, okay, today we're writing like the very musical angel. Then tomorrow we're gonna write the more like angel of power, like Michael, and we're gonna write these battles. And so there's like, I like kind of switching between them, but to answer your question, it probably is Gabriel.
I think my question's next. My question is, what led to your choices of the locations of the angels?
So this, I have like a kind of a twofold answer here. So one, I definitely wanted the angels to be diverse in what they looked like and where they lived and where they came from. So that was a large part of it. And I wanted them spread across the world. So that was also another part of it, because, the world is so diverse and vast and everybody looks different. So I wanted them to reflect kind of the people and the culture of where they lived. I think another part of that, though, does come from my research and where I want to take the rest of the series.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a lot of correlations and connections for each angel. They're related to these, stones and kind of birds and all these things. And so some of these correlations make more sense as the story goes on, but kind of where they're located now is kind of a hint at some of those future correlations that I plan to bring into the story more. So that was my twofold answer for you. I think we're back to Kimmy.
There we go. I keep muting myself.
That's
Okay. So, which character did you enjoy writing most, least, and why? So, a little similar to kind of what Jenny was asking earlier, but also a little bit of information on which one was maybe not that you necessarily like least, but what was just the toughest one to write necessarily.
Yeah. No. So, I mean, I'm going to take this two ways. So, my normal answer that I say, so my favorite or which character did I enjoy writing most? Usually I would say Jordan because he's easier to relate to. He's easier to he's the only human character. He's just easy mind space to go to. My least enjoyable character to write is Satan by far. He is not easy to write at all. And it took me forever to get his voice, his tone. Even writing about him in the first person is just it took a while. So he's probably my least favorite only because he's so challenging. And he's just so spiteful and stubborn too that it's just it's just he's hard. But to look at it in a different way, hold on.
Good.
Let's see.
Dead air.
Well, I guess while we're waiting for Sarah to rejoin us, did any of us have favorite characters? Like who were our favorite characters? I guess we can go alphabetically again. Courtney, not to throw you on the spot.
That's all right. Oddly enough, I was really intrigued by Lilith as a character. I can't say she's my favorite, but I definitely want to learn a lot more about her because I didn't know anything in regards to her before reading Sarah's book. So I'm going to say her.
It was very intriguing, especially her relationship with all of like what happened with Eden. I think my favorite character was
She's back. Let her finish this thought.
One second, let me finish what my favorite character was. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but the Angel of Medicine. Just because I thought that was very intriguing in terms of basically taking his powers and putting them to use directly to help people.
Welcome back, Sarah.
Sorry, I felt my internet was like, you're unstable, and then it just bounced me out. So sorry about that, guys. So I don't know where we were.
You were at part 2 of which characters you liked writing the most, the least, and why.
Right. So I was just, I guess, just to finish that real quick, I was just going to say another way to look at that I haven't really looked at before. If you want to say, I guess, the least, I guess, out of the 7 that I don't enjoy writing, it's really hard to answer. But maybe I would say Jofiel might be one of the harder ones because he doesn't come as maybe naturally to me as some of the others. And I don't know, the other ones, they kind of all have either these connections to Jordan or like other kind of secondary characters like Chamuel and Martha and things like that. So Jofiel doesn't have too many of those. So I think that might be if I had to pick one of the 7. But yeah, continuing on.
I think that's me. So it was, what characters surprised you by how much they took off on their own from what you originally planned?
So there was a few. The biggest were Astrid and Tabitha. They were not planned at all. They were not in this story. And I literally was writing myself into a hole. And I was just like, if only I had some magic to get out of it. And they're paying Astrid and Tabitha. So they were not planned. And then, of course, once they were on the page, they just took off. Like, they had a mind of their own, and they were just going to do their own thing. I would say Uriel was another one. He's the one in Australia. And my intent with Uriel, he was going to be like the quiet, shy one who kind of stood in the back, didn't say much. And then all of a sudden he became this really like scrappy, I have an attitude angel. So I was like, okay, we're going to roll with it. Cause one of them had to be a little bit more, I don't know, scrappier. And then I've touched on it, but the Chamuel and the Martha connection, that wasn't anticipated either. I mean, Martha wasn't even in the book until towards the end when I was like, oh, I need someone to maintain this house. And then she came, and then, and then I just had this, I was like, it's weird how characters really want to write themselves sometimes and want to connect with other characters. And Chamuel and Martha were one of those pairs. But yeah, those are the few I could think of.
All right, it is me again. Kind of going back to what you said earlier, how you read a lot of, when you first started thinking about this series and this book, how you had read a lot of either like female central books or very female positive, very, most of them protagonists were female. Did you ever consider making any of the seven main angels that we follow female? And if so, what ultimately decided no for you?
So I did originally consider making them female. And I think I was really happy that you asked this question, because I was always worried that not having a lot of female characters in this first book might have been like something people didn't like. But once Jordan kind of appeared and fully formed in my head, I gravitated towards making the angels all male, only because Jordan, he's an orphan, so he doesn't have he doesn't have parents, but in that same sense, he doesn't have a lot of role models. And so making the angels male just kind of in my head made sense, because it's somebody he could look at and look up to and kind of they could teach him and help him discover who he was. So that was a big part of it. But I think the other thing that I've always wanted to say is, even though the main 7 aren't female, I kind of like dropping these little like hints or clues that like a lot of the females hold the power. They're just not there yet. Like Lilith holds the power. Seraphiel holds the power. She's pretty much the voice of God. Ariel, she's one of the ones on the Archangel Council. I haven't gotten into her too much, but she's an angel of power. So she's definitely, another really strong, powerful character. And then at the very end of this book, the Triune were touched on, and most of those members are female angels. So they are all coming. And then there is Sophia. It's her. So I did it mainly for Jordan, but I also was like, I had to drop these few hints where it's like, yeah, no, they're coming. You just gotta wait for them a little, but they are coming. And then once they show up, it's like full force. Like, you can't stop them. So did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, I know we're talking about book 1, and you're in the middle of writing book 2,
Yes.
and we know book 3 is going to come. So we still have a lot to look forward to. But with all these different ideas and research and things that you've had and tossed away for now, do any of those sit on the shelf now for what happens after the 3rd book is done?
Yes. So there are about, I would say, 2 story ideas I have set in this world, if you would like to call them, that are connected to this world. There's a part of me that wants to talk about it. There's a part of me that doesn't, but
You're just sitting there waiting.
Yeah, they're sitting there. So one I would say is actually like a sequel series is what I call it. it's kind of a continuation.
Spin-offs.
Yeah. And I anticipate that maybe being like a duology, so maybe only 2 books instead of 3 books. And then there is kind of some kind of companion book or novel in my head that kind of takes 2 forms. I would like kind of like a book where you have like a glossary and like all the cast of characters and like a map one day, but I also have some of ideas for novellas that I think could fit in with that too. So some kind of companion book or novel, however you want to call that. So yeah, definitely kind of 2 ideas coming up that are associated with this world. I also, though, I have I would say probably 2 other story ideas that are just totally outside of it, completely new. So yeah, there's definitely more things coming, both familiar and unfamiliar.
Yes, that's what librarians want to hear. Their author has more in store for them. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so that kind of concludes part 1, the portion where you asked me questions. So now we'll kind of move into part 2, where we do more of like a book club chat and we all get to answer some questions and talk about it and whatnot. So I guess we could jump in if everybody's ready.
I believe.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think I'm kicking this part off, and it kind of goes over. It kind of touches on the question I asked during the freeze. But what type of angel do you think would be the most fun to be? Like, what specialty do you think would be the most fun? And then kind of going off that, what would be the most practical? And if you were an angel or were in one of these subsets, what type would you be? Not like what type you would want to be, but based on kind of how you are now, like what would you sort yourself as?
So since I missed part of this conversation, what part were we on?
So I just asked if we had a favorite. I think it was if we had a favorite character. So we implemented the alphabetical way of going, since everyone appears in different boxes in different places in people's Zooms. So Courtney had gone, and then I had finished saying that I liked the character whose name I cannot pronounce, that had the healing ability of the
Uriel.
Thank you. Just because to me that seemed like the most angel-esque behavior, to have that power and to play it directly with people involved. Like you could see they were doing it exactly, versus for Great Gabriel, like yes, he's the music, but we don't really know exactly kind of how that plays out or helps the humans around him. So
I was gonna say, in terms of practicality, I would totally agree with the healing and the medicine is the most practical. I mean, especially because Jordan's constantly getting hurt. So someone's got to be there to help him.
I feel like the I want to say like homemaking or the hospitality aspect, the cooking would be so useful. And can I hire him?
I have questions about his ability to taste his cuisine.
Ooh.
So
well, he ultimately can.
He can taste it, he can eat it, or he just knows.
No, like, so he can't eat. So I think it's like his ability is that kind of innate sense that he knows that it's going to taste good.
I have thoughts about Jenny's question. First of all, my favorite characters were but I know that you mentioned their names, Agatha or Tabitha. Wait, what is it?
Tabitha and Astrid.
Yes, I loved them. They were fantastic. They were my favorite. And I also really liked Satan, which sounds weird to say that, but I really did like his complexity and his character. So it surprised me to hear it was difficult for the author to write the character, because it came out so well, I thought. So it didn't seem challenging at all from a reader perspective. And if I was an angel, I would be an angel of teaching, because that's like my job, literally. but I would like to be an angel of art. But I have really poor artistic ability, so not realistic for me.
I do believe I skipped my turn. I apologize. I don't have a favorite. I feel like Sarah's the mother of them, and it's like I can't pick just one. I like them each for their own qualities. So I don't know who I would be. Probably somebody who would be, I don't even know which one I would fall under. I will ask my children about that one. They'll probably peg me right away. But I'll pass on that one because I like them all.
Sarah, you should develop a quiz instead of the sorting hat. It's like, which angel are you?
Yeah. It's funny. There's like all these things I was like, I should have had like some kind of character card or something to keep everything like in track. But yeah, like a sorting quiz is just, it's right up there with them.
And I'll jump into, so to the earlier question of like character, I agree with, I think it was Courtney that said earlier about Lilith. So Lilith is just fascinating across like any kind of like, I don't want to say like mythological or supernatural or whatever way you want to talk about her. She's just so like mysterious in everything that she's in. And she's just a really interesting, definitely like character / just like the myth about her. There's just so much we don't know because she hasn't really been included in a lot of stuff in the past, but she's definitely making a comeback in a lot of different areas. And then for Angel, I know I keep joking I would be like a Divergent and I would be a couple of them. But kind of similar to what Missy said, like I wish I was good at art, but I'm terrible, like for the most part. But also like the healing aspect, I love that too, because to me healing is much more than like healing like a broken bone. It can be healing like a mindset or something like that. So that one kind of lands with me really well too.
That's, I think, well, I love animals. Anyone can attest that anytime I'm with them and I see a dog, I'm like, oh my gosh, a puppy. So I think part of me feels like I would be an angel of nature or fall into that because they possess the capability to protect nature, but also like to care for it. And I feel to some extent humans are also part of that nature, not necessarily the physical wounds, but in libraries, we spend our days going, oh, how can I help you? Like, what do you need? So in a sense, we're also caring for them.
So to go for the first question, I agree with Missy on Astrid and Tabitha. I love those characters. Like they are just hysterical. And that is actually for me, and I've told you this, that the scenes with Satan actually humanized him with Astrid and Tabitha because he can't kill them. He can't destroy them. He needs something from them. And it drives him crazy. And those scenes just made me laugh. And it made him more likable, which I thought was amazing. And as for my favorite angel, it's always been Gabriel. Like, there's an artist who goes to the Colorado Renaissance Festival who's done an entire an angel series, and the very first one I bought was her Gabriel picture because I just love him. He's always been my favorite. For me, as far as what kind of angel I would be, I'd actually probably want to go for something to do with children because I love the innocence of children. I love working with 18 and unders. They're just so much fun. I mean, they can be crazy and they can be tough sometimes, but they're just a lot of fun to work with. So that I think would be where I'd go.
I can finish off. I'm not gonna do my favorite angel. That's too hard. But what type of angel would I be? I don't really know. I could say I would love to be like an angel of music. Like I'd love to be able to play a musical instrument. I'd also love to be able to do like art. And I say that because, like, in a way I have like an artistic element to myself with graphic design, but like I would love to, like, my grandfather used to like draw, and I mean hardcore draw, and that was just incredible to me. So I wish I had that same talent. So those would be the ones I want to be. I'll leave it at that.
All right, so I think I have the next question, and part of it is addressed to you, Sara, and then part of it's to everyone else. What scene was one of your favorites to write? And then for the other readers, which scene did you appreciate reading the most, or which scene stuck with you the most? Do you want me to answer my own question first? Okay. I think one of the scenes that strangely has stuck out to me is when they're in Tokyo and they go up to his apartments, and you see that he's an artist on one side, but he's also an inventor on the other side. And I just like that concept of the angels of art are so much more than creating something beautiful. He's also really practical. He makes the holy water bombs and stuff. So that scene really has stuck out to me, and I just enjoyed that.
I can go next. For me, the scene that probably, I don't know if it stuck out to me the most, but I just loved it because it gave the angels such a human touch, was when they're at Jordan's house toward the end of the book in the upstate. And again, can't pronounce his name to save my life, but the angel of home is just hanging out at the kitchen, and Jordan goes like, "What's for dinner?" And the housekeeper's like, "Go deliver this mail." And you can tell it's just like totally set up, and the angel's kind of clueless, and the housekeeper's like, "I'm gonna kill you if you mess this up." And it just kind of created that sense of like family dynamic in the short time they've known each other, and also gave them that humanizing ability of they were looking out for Jordan or trying to be the role model, but not really sure how to do it. So I just really enjoyed that scene.
And I would actually have to agree with Jenny. So though I loved just like the nature of travel throughout the book, it was actually once they came together kind of as like that family unit that was just really neat to see, because it, like any, with a book coming to an end type of a scene, they had this journey together. They learned more about each other. They learned more about themselves, Jordan especially. And then just kind of that like culminating moment of them all coming together to be this kind of like just funny family where, yeah, it's a little bit of dysfunction, like kind of in what Jenny was saying with getting a little bit edgy with each other, but also like they had accomplished this thing together. And then this was like the time that they landed in. So I really enjoyed that part.
Picking one, I can't pick one. There's just too many. I love the scenes where he's in the orphanage, as strange as that sounds, but it throws me back to Harry Potter and all these other connections that I can make. And I'm trying to remember certain characters throughout all the scenes because I know more is coming on some of them. I'm not thrilled about fighting in heaven. I have to have a talk. I have a problem with that, but I'm probably not the only one who has a problem with that. And my view of heaven seems to be opposite of everything that I have seen outside of what I've been taught. But the scenes in the book, oh man, there's so many that I'm like, when we're in each country, it's like, there's got to be something else here that we have to remember and tuck it away because that's got to develop into something later. And Lilith, I am so happy that you included Lilith because I didn't know about her until the last, I would say 10 years of my life. And I've been on the planet a lot longer than all of you put together. So it was like, wow, how much else do we not know? And that's why it's like trying to remember each little tidbit from these scenes. It's like, I can't pick a favorite one. But you know that the house scene at the end, there's going to be a lot more going on with the neighbors next door that are going to play a very important role. So I'm just waiting for book 2.
As for myself, I loved the scenes in hell. I thought your imagination of hell was so rich and different than anything I'd ever read before or heard about before. Like for instance, the marketplace in one of the circles was like such an interesting, and like hearing about I'm so curious about why they're trying to get money and their like system of their economy and things like that. So that was fascinating to me. And I wanted more of that. So hopefully we'll get more of that in the future. And I loved the scenes of like, I guess I really gravitated towards the before scenes, like where you're kind of setting up like previously, and those scenes I thought were so interesting because they were written from such a different world, like a fantasy world. And then when you juxtapose them in like the reality of Jordan traveling to all of these places, and you could see like maybe some of your experience and your own travels came into it. So it seemed very authentic. So I don't know. I just enjoyed I enjoyed Satan and the hell scene.
I really want a pair of cats to name Astrid and Tabitha now. Just a very like pair of cats.
And I actually completely agree with Missy. I touched on that with my favorite characters, is that it was the scenes with them and just Satan's exasperation with them.
Mm-hmm.
It's so funny. I mean, it literally made me laugh out loud, and I don't say that very often with scenes from books. I also the scene that really pulled me into the story that I was like, and then I had to keep like couldn't put it down, and I told you that because literally that night, the very next day, I was like, I didn't get any sleep last night because of you, was when we reached Gabriel's point of view and started seeing heaven and the fall of Satan. And that from that point on, I was like, I can't put this book down. And so I think those would be the two major ones. And then I also love the stuff at the end with all of them suddenly, you know, joining together to become family, especially considering how all of them said, peace, we don't want anything to do with this. And Gabriel's like, no.
So I'll answer the question, but also, so Astrid and Tabitha, they're coming back. And you will get more marketplace scenes, and you will find out why they want the money. So that's all I will say there. And then the other thing I wanted to say is, yeah, a lot for me, since Jordan is an orphan, a large part of it was kind of making him have a found family. And so I'm glad that like it came through in the book, because that was really one of my goals, because he never had, I mean, he has maybe, you know, Sophia, but, you know, I mean, I come from such a big family, you know, I felt bad for Jordan not having, you know, more than just Sophia. So I'm glad that came across on the page, because that's something I really wanted to do. But for me, I guess I love writing battle scenes, action scenes. Like, I love it. So I guess if I had to pick one, I'll say the Africa little fight skirmish was probably one of my favorite things to write. The stuff in heaven, obviously, I loved that. Just it took a lot like more, because I really had to, that was like a whole drawn out thing, so that just took a little more time. The Africa thing came like really super like quick. And then my least like favorite fight scene, battle scene, is the whole Tokyo thing that happens, because I literally was writing myself into another hole, and I was just like, how are we going to get out of this? And what happened is that was the only way they could get out of it. So, but yeah.
All right, I think I have the next one. So to everyone, what made the setting unique or important, and could it have taken place anywhere? So I'll go ahead and answer that one first. I mean, I don't really think that you can set heaven or hell like anywhere but heaven and hell for those ones. So it's kind of like a yes and no type of an answer. So, but with some of the other places, like maybe, but I think there was just a very strong sense of place when you got to anywhere across the, you know, like worldwide map, because we go to so many different places, that like they were just written so strongly that they had to be there. But maybe they could have been somewhere else as well. I'm excited to see all the new maybe travels in the upcoming books as well, other than heaven and hell. But yeah, so those first two kind of non-negotiable in a story like this, right? You kind of have to have those two.
I would have to agree with that. And I just want to add that I think it's really important that Sara ended up including, you know, some visits to Eden and seeing those first interactions of who would become Satan. Just like they all had to take turns watching Over Eden, and I think that was a really interesting inclusion. But otherwise, I agree. I think all of the locational traveling places that we went to, like they couldn't have been anywhere else. Sara did a perfect job of describing them.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I really liked the almost like the matchmaking in terms of, well, this is the angel specialty. Sorry, I couldn't think of the word. This is the angel specialty. Where would they fit best in? But I think the one that probably stood out to me the most was when they went to Australia, just because, you know, they took that 20-hour plane and then it's still another 10, 20 hours in the car, and it just kind of reaffirmed, Australia is huge, but also just kind of the lengths they had to go to get them all together, because the world isn't sane and giant, and they kind of had a guesstimate of where they were, but it was all kind of a crapshoot in terms of if we were going to be able to find them.
I love the fact that she went global on practically every continent. So that was great, because I think that unifies all the humans in relationship to the angels as well. And of course, Eden was great because Lilith got more juicy parts, and you found out more about her through that. And you can't have a book with angels without being in heaven. And again, it intrigues me of the hierarchies, and even in hell with Dante and his hierarchy. But yeah, she did an excellent job on that. And it couldn't have been done anywhere else, I don't think, or any way possible. So kudos. Really enjoyed that. Keep up the good work.
Okay, so my thoughts are, I agree that it couldn't be in anywhere but heaven or hell, but I think that your interpretation of heaven and hell was so unique and really different from how it's been written in the past, even though it's been written about for centuries, really. So I thought that, I mean, that could be different in any story. And a lot of times people choose to write that the exact same way. So I did like that yours was different. That kind of made it a new, it kind of took out some of the things that you automatically think and automatically assume based on like your past experiences with religion or church, and kind of made it like a new place. Like, even though it was called heaven and hell and it represented those things, it was almost like a brand new world or universe. So I thought that was really cool. And yeah, yeah, that's all I got on that one.
Well, that kind of all falls into my question. Did the book make you think about your own thoughts or feelings of what heaven and hell was? Obviously, it has. You've already touched on that. But how do they differ from what you were taught? I found that I learned a lot, different perspectives of other people's heaven and hells. The fact that there was a war in heaven kind of goes against what I was taught heaven was, even though I did know there was a war and there was a fallen angel, but they didn't make such a big thing out of that. It was like, that's what happened. And okay, but heaven for you is going to be all this. And it's like, but the angels are still having problems up there. How can heaven be like that? So it made me think a lot about what I learned, what I remember from what I learned, things that I have recently learned with Lilith from the Jewish folklore traditions. And even my son had mentioned that it made him question and want to brush up on his religion because he didn't remember a lot of this stuff. Mm-hmm. And it's like, yes, but you got to remember it's fiction. So there is some fiction mixed in with this. So trying to remember what is we learned as fact versus the fiction that is so geniusly interwoven in this can make it a little difficult to separate for those who are not fully conscious of what is this and, oh, that's Sara taking creative license. So that woke up a lot of things, especially, like I said, with Lilith. It was like, I'm so glad somebody else is talking about her. And it's like, wish there was more research on her. It's so sketchy. And it's like, I think she really had more of an impact in our world prior world than has been told about her. So now, if anybody can remember my question after that. Basically, how was it different from when you were taught? And that's assuming people are of Catholic faith here. And I know you're not. I know Sara is, because I was with her when she was almost born.
I'm going to go backwards on this one because Sara and I actually have very similar backgrounds. I was also raised Catholic. And again, I have a lot of similar interests that Sara does. In fact, I know one of the books that she uses research was an Encyclopedia of Angels, and I actually own that book as well. And yeah. So there, yeah, for me, there's also another interest I have. There's a role-playing game that came out of France years and years ago that's based on angels and demons, and they took a lot of that research as well. And actually, one of my friends has been completely rewriting it to actually fit better the canon. But so for me, a lot of what Sara wrote about is a lot of the stuff where I'm like, yes, this sounds more like what the actual lore is and not necessarily what's being taught as fact, which I thought was interesting. And also, because I didn't get a chance to answer that, the previous one is I agree with everybody else on the heaven and hell. There was no other place, but I agree with Missy that Sara did take and put in her own flavor on those two places. And then the ideas of Eden and a different idea of how Satan fell, and a lot more details in that, and a mystery surrounding that I'm hoping gets answered either in the next book, or if not that one, the next one. And I also loved how global it was. I loved how global the book really was, because I think, and there's a bad tendency in a lot of American fiction to just focus on America, and but if you're going to go for something as, an idea that's as universal as this one that was originally Middle Eastern anyway, to go global with it, I think really makes it more powerful and stronger.
Yeah, and I was just going to jump in here with a few things, but yeah, so I mean, so the travel keeps coming back. That doesn't go away, and I haven't necessarily traveled to each of the locations I've put in this book or future books. Some of them I have, but I just love travel, and I love just seeing the world in different parts of the world. So I just wanted to include some of that throughout the series to just kind of get that kind of thrilling adventure. And then to go off kind of Mary Jo, your question here, that is kind of what drove me crazy, is because it's like, okay, yeah, there's a war, and it's like, yeah, and someone fell, but it's like, why, who? Like, I constantly was like nagging at me, and that's part of why I wrote this, is because it just was like, I want to know more. And like, even the Lilith component, once I didn't find out about Lilith probably until, I really didn't know about her probably till college. Even the thought of her and what she was. And so that just was another one that drove me crazy, because it's like, why didn't I know about her? Why doesn't everybody know about her? She needs to, like, her side of the story needs to be included just as much as the angels need to be included, just as much as Satan needs to be included. So it was just kind of all these things that are just hinted at. It's like, oh yeah, there was a war and there was Lilith, but I just wanted to know more about it, and that's just, I was just craving those answers, so I just kind of gave them myself answers.
See, and that's kind of where I fall in with this. It's not so much that it questioned my beliefs or that sort of thing, or made me question anything. It just made me so much more curious. I was born and raised Catholic, did the whole like Catholic school thing, so we got religious education. But even like, I did not know there were this many angel names that ended in EL. Like, every time one came up, I was like, is this real? Or no? Okay. So a lot of it was, the curiosity was, oh, is this widely accepted as what's going on? And I just haven't like dug further, or is this coming out of Sarah's brain? So it made me very curious, and kind of showed me how much I don't know. So.
I would say for me, I think definitely I took it up the lens from like I have a heavy literature background as well, and there comes a lot of like lore and things surrounding that. So I think mostly it was just really interesting to kind of see this deep dive into all these different pieces that I have read of through literature and through that lens, and just kind of seeing it done in such a unique way, and in a way where like a character, we see like Jordan's growth and how he learns more about himself, and how he starts out in such, for lack of a better like term, humble beginnings, and then grows into this magnificent thing. Like that was a really interesting journey for me. I also really appreciated, from kind of like that literature background, you mentioned Paradise Lost. That's one of my all-time favorites that I still find myself at like 2 a.m. thinking about it. Like I kid you not, it still comes to mind after having to, like do annotations and all this stuff many, many years ago. And so I appreciated seeing those connections in there as well. And really just exactly like what you guys have been saying too, it makes you ask why. So all those things that we learn, whether it's through someone's faith or it's through that literature lens, it's always fun and interesting and helps us grow to ask why. And that's something that I love too, is that I feel like some of those whys were just really discussed throughout your story, in addition to maybe even answered in some capacity. So I thought that was really neat to see, like kind of like that journey through that discussion.
And I don't know, I do not have a Catholic background whatsoever. So a lot of what was in the book was new or somewhat new to me. Like I knew there was a fall, and I knew there was Satan and that there was good and evil, but that was basically my religious teaching. So it was very interesting to really do that deep dive. Yeah.
I guess I teach at a Catholic school, but I wasn't raised Catholic. I was raised Lutheran, so now I'm like the rebel of my family too. My mom, she became Catholic after my dad passed away, and so did my brother. So I'm like the only lone Lutheran left in my family, and I teach at the Catholic school, so it's kind of funny. So I've had a lot of that mythology in my past, I guess, but well, I don't know. It's interesting to think of it as a mythology when you've heard it from a religious standpoint. And so I really liked that. I like like Kimmy with Paradise Lost, that's how I feel about Dante's Inferno. Like I absolutely loved that. I loved that whole story. So this reminded me a lot of the same feelings I had when I was reading that book or reading that epic play. And so I just I don't think it really made me I didn't really connect it to my own spirituality in a sense, but I did connect it to like my own background knowledge and asked a lot of questions. So that was really cool to revisit some of those things that I haven't thought about since Sunday school, because I haven't been like a practicing like religious person in my years now, even though I consider myself to be spiritual. So I thought it was like a really interesting way to experience that.
Okay. I think who's up? Sarah's up?
That would be me, yep. So what character in the book would you like to meet the most? And for you, Sarah, which character would you like to write about the most? Or would you like to read, or would everybody like to read more about? And for me, I mean, like the one character that I am most intrigued by is Lilith, just like everyone else. Like she is the one I'm like, as soon as we got to like just the brief little scenes that she has, I was like, I want to know more. I want to know what her connection is. I want to know why she's doing what she's doing, because there's a why there. Like, and you did a great job of setting that up, is that there's a why. And characters I like to hang out with, even though they're in hell, is Astrid and Tabitha. I mean, they're fun, and they don't show any fear whatsoever. Even though they're working with Satan, they showed no fear. So, that makes them fun. And then, of course, like, the angels, especially as they all start becoming more and more concerned with Jordan and kind of become nursemaids almost, is just fun to watch. So, I mean, it's hard for me to choose any, but yeah, I would have to say that Lilith is the one I am most intrigued to see more from.
My answer is the exact same as Sarah. Like, I think we need to be friends, Sarah. I agree. I totally agree. There's nothing else I can add to that.
I'm on the Lilith train, so yes, I agree. Yeah. Interesting. Why?
Yes to Lilith, and obviously to Tabitha and
Astrid.
Thank you. I was gonna say like Agatha, but that's not right. But I also kind of want to know more about the Sanctuarium and where the sisters kind of fall into that, just because it does seem very shrouded in mystery. And it seems like they wanted to tell them more and set it up to tell them more when they were going to send Jordan to Africa to study with the angel. So I just, not necessarily a character, but just kind of like more mysteries that would like to be solved.
Well, and I'll throw my hat in too and say, like, of course, Lilith. I've seen Lilith in a handful of different things over the last few years, and she's kind of always discussed very differently. And it just kind of depends on the author or the person in the show who's doing it and kind of which path she takes. So that's kind of like my curiosity is which path would she take if Sarah were to write Lilith out more into the next books? When? So she's just so fantastic and so interesting and just such a, again, as I said earlier, like mystery. You just never know. And she has been left out of so many different pieces of literature in the past as well. I love that she's finally getting her like time and being revisited in so many different things.
And I have to say, I would like to meet Jordan because he actually reminds me a lot of my younger brother, and I just want to give him a whole bunch of bandages and a whole bunch of love, but at the same time, he's got a whole set of angels watching out for him. But I think I'm actually interested in learning more about his family, his mom and dad. They kind of give me a Lily and James Potter sort of vibe. So I don't know. Besides Lilith, that's who I'd want to know more about.
I will jump in. So, oh gosh, there were so many things in my head now. I can't remember them. So in terms of something that I've always thought about writing more about, obviously Lilith. I mean, she was, I would say that scene, the only scene you have with her and Satan and when he first falls, that was probably one of the only hell things that came like so, like she was just so easy to write. But then at the same sense, she is also, for me, discovering her story and kind of where I want to take her and what I want to do with that. It's been like a long journey. And I think a lot of the time, because I got like dropped that scene in my head of her and Satan's interaction, but then it was like, mystery, I'm going away. I don't want to tell you the rest of my story yet. So I was like, okay, so I kind of just let it sit. And really, even just recently, I've been getting like these glimpses and I'm like, okay, like here she comes, like it's happening, like it's about to just go onto the page. Like, so it's almost like it's just can't stop her. Like, it's like when she wants to be written, she'll be written. Like, that's kind of the thing. And then when she does want to be written, it comes and flows so easily. But one of the things that I've always kind of thought about writing about is I've always thought about this because I'm like, okay, so the angels were sent down to Earth and you see them in this moment, but what has they been doing these like hundreds of years, like centuries? And so for me, that's something I've always like thought about, and I'm like, well, that's certainly a great place to do, I don't know, either a spin-off series or novellas. And I think if anything, I might have discovered like one kind of answer in that time frame of what happened, and it has to do more with Michael. So that might be something that comes into play in the future, but that's always something I've wondered about, and I'm probably going to keep just letting it sit and thinking about it. But yeah.
Well, one thing's for sure, you have a lot of pressure to write Lilith now, because we are expecting great things, which I'm sure we'll get.
Mm-hmm. Who's up? Mary Jo, second question.
Sarah's up? No, it was me. Right. Okay. Did you learn anything from the book that you were unaware of or questioned if that was from research or from fictional works? I even forgot when I thought of this. Go ahead.
For me, other than Gabriel, it was literally every angel name. Did I make these up? Like, have I just been like living under a rock? But I figured it out once I did a little of my own research. But it threw me for a loop first time through.
I think something that I had no idea about and kind of was wondering whether it was based in fact or not was like Metatron's cube and how all the stones and rings and other aspects have to come together to create that. I've never heard of that before, so.
I could jump in real quick to answer some of that. So Metatron's cube is a thing. I didn't make that up. But in terms of like the rings and the stones and how they fit into Metatron's cube, yeah, that's something more that I brought into it. And that kind of comes in. I was talking a little bit before about kind of all the correlations that I made with the angels in terms of what they were associated with and things like that. I always wanted that to be a part of the story, and the stones and the spheres were the way that those correlations kind of came to fruition. And so for me, I would say once I saw Metatron's cube, like the diagram of it, I was like, this is it. This is the formation. Like, this is how it's going to go, like, turn out. And so that's kind of how that went.
I didn't know about that.
I would say for me, it kind of jogged a few like just questions that I had from past things I had read, like and I can never pronounce this, the Nephilim. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay. Because we've seen that in other things, right? But that's one that I'm not as familiar with. If it's, if it comes from like faith-based, if it's something more created, but I know I've seen it in other things. So it definitely was something interesting to me. And then the concept of like, what was it called? The angels that would go, the watchers, like the angels that would go down to earth. So like that general concept too, like it's maybe not always called the Watchers, but something that I've seen throughout a lot of different stories and mythology and TV shows, of course, and pop culture, of course. So it made me really think again about like, oh, where did this come from? Was this something that was created? Was this something I've seen before? And it was a really solid mix of pretty much both, like interwoven throughout the story.
Yeah, I would say one of the reasons why the story is so successful is because it has just enough that we're familiar with from various parts of our life, and just enough that we're like, wait, I've never heard of that before. Wait, is that a thing? And so like that's what keeps you so intrigued the whole time, I think, because you're everything I was questioning, is this like part of Christian mythology, or is this like Sarah's idea? And so I liked that. I'm sure each idea has a lot of both, and that's probably what makes it so complex and rich. And I just think that is one of the strong points.
One of the things that I really liked, just because my general background in this is very similar to Sarah's, so there was a lot in there that I was like, oh yeah. I knew about, but what I liked was the marriage of adding the DNA science in there, along, especially with the Nephilim and the Watchers and all of that stuff. I love that you put that in there because like it makes it very modern and very today, but also very timeless because we've got all of these ancient concepts, all of these, ancient ideas in here, along with these very modern things. And I think that even more made the story so rich and interesting. Like you can tell you did your research and then took it to the next step up in making it your own.
Yeah.
Thank you. We all answer that, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I think other Sarah's up again.
Yeah. Okay. So it's
Sarah.
Yeah. So whose point of view chapters did you enjoy the most? If you could hear the same story from another character's point of view, who would it be? So for me, I mean, I loved the angel chapters. Like I just loved reading from their perspective. I mean, and all the stuff from Gabriel's perspective. I loved, the intriguing ideas that were brought up in Michael's chapter. But I gotta admit, the stuff I liked the most is again Satan stuff.
Yes.
Because of Astrid and Tabitha. I mean, like and to me, it's just you made him whiny, like whiny emo boy, and with them, he just becomes human and funny. But I also liked his like just all the layers to him. So ultimately, I didn't expect to enjoy Satan's chapters as much as I did, but I enjoyed them. And from the others, it would be interesting to hear like the fall from some of the other perspectives, like what the other angels are thinking.
For me, I think it would be, I don't really have a favorite perspective aside from Satan because I just really enjoyed those scenes. In Helen, he was really the only one narrating in hell, versus all the other narrators were either in heaven or up on earth. But I think it would be very interesting to see a chapter or two that goes back in time, but not the angel's timeline, Jordan's timeline in terms of growing up at the orphanage, kind of when he asked these questions about, the fleur-de-lis necklace and kind of what's going on around him, what the sisters tell him to make it seem normal, even though they know he's maybe predestined for something and that they also were very involved in the Sanctuarium, just in terms of like kind of how they play that out as he's growing up.
I think I really appreciated Gabriel's chapters a lot because, I don't know, you see how much he loves and has a brotherhood with his fellow angels in heaven. And then when Satan falls, you see that love that he has for him slowly changing over kind of into not a hatred, but just like what happened? How could that happen? So I really appreciated, those deep emotions that those chapters touched upon. But I think I'd also be really curious because, like Jenny said, we only hear from Satan down in hell. So I'd kind of be interested in seeing what the six kind of feel about Satan and how it is to rule their little sections of hell.
Oh my gosh, we should have a chapter of Astrid and Tabitha narrating. Like all over the place. It's going to be a bonus scene at the end of one of the books.
I don't know. I keep like going back and forth. I think for a lot of the same reasons that Jenny said, like it would be Jordan, just because that's kind of what I gravitate towards. I'm either like hardcore realistic fiction or hardcore fantasy, which makes no sense because they're polar opposites. But within fantasy, I love kind of knowing like that backstory and the like why behind why people tick, especially the ones that are kind of like the underdog characters. So for me, definitely knowing like, well, what did happen? What were all these kind of different things that led him to where he's at? Is that even true? What we find out, all those different pieces, and kind of like evaluating who or what events or just what in general led up to him being who he is now.
You guys know I already love the Tabitha and Astrid scenes and all the scenes that Satan is his perspective. And I really liked what Courtney said about I'd like to see some of what the Six think and more about that and their perspectives. So I'm excited for what's to come.
That's interesting. I forgot about the other six who fell, and to hear their voice now versus whatever. If we get to find out or what the fight in heaven was, might lead a lot more light on the situation. But it's also the little part of Michael was supposed to be the one sent down, but Samuel was sent instead. So to hear each saying about how they felt about that is intriguing to me.
Yeah, I guess to finish off the question, well, I was just going to say some of the things you're asking for and you're wanting, they are coming. I would say definitely in terms of Jordan, kind of at the orphanage, probably when he was slightly younger. And even some of the other six, they're starting to rear their heads too, in terms of who's coming forward and who, wants to do something else. So yeah, a lot of that is coming into play. So it will be coming in the future. I'm trying to think. Where are we? Whose point of view? Well, I kind of answered that. Whose point of view? I mean, it's kind of, for me, it's Jordan, because he's just, I think his story was the one I had to create from scratch, like completely. And so that was a little, that was fun for me because I just got to go wherever I wanted to go with him.
All right, so I have the next question. If the book was made into an audiobook, whose voice or voices would you like to hear narrate? And I have to preface this by saying I don't actually listen to audiobooks, but when I was reading this, I just kept hearing voices. And that sounds really divine or really scary. But I was thinking Tom Holland from Spider-Man. I could totally hear him doing Jordan's voice. But I don't know if he would do the whole book. Obviously not. I think you'd need multiple voices for it. But yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree that a full cast of characters would probably be best. Just because, unless maybe you got Jim Dale to do it. I don't know if he's still alive. But just because he did the whole Harry Potter series and he somehow was able to do a Dumbledore and a 12-year-old Harry. So that made sense. But I think definitely a full cast of characters. And I'm not sure if movies have definitely tainted this perspective, but since we don't hear God's perspective, I think Morgan Freeman should voice Gabriel or one of the angels. Just because I associate his voice with a heavenly presence.
God, yeah.
Yes.
It's funny because my son is the one who's casting for the movie of this, and he gave me a list. I passed it on to Sarah earlier this evening. Half of those names I don't know. There's only 2 people I really know. But I never thought of the audio voice for this. And to stay true to the book, you're really going to need different voices or another Jim Dale who can change his voice beautifully to match the characters in the book. It's wild to even think of an audiobook for this.
Is Jim Dale dead?
I don't think so. I think he's still alive.
Oh, okay, cool. We can just get him.
I could just throw something in. So, I mean, for me, Gabriel is the embodiment of Henry Cavill. I'm just saying, that voice there, totally a Gabriel to me. But for an audiobook, I obviously I can't get celebrities to do an audiobook, but I think something that was really cool. So for my book trailer, that kind of voice in the beginning, I want to do an audiobook. So I would love to his name was Zach. So I'd love to get him to do, I don't know. He kind of has experience doing multiple voices, but I don't know if that's something he'd want to do, but I definitely think his voice for one of them would be really cool. I'm not sure who. It probably could be Gabriel or Michael at this point, but yeah.
I'm like still thinking on this. So I'm like one of those rarities that I'm like almost exclusively an audiobook listener at this point. Mostly because I did so much reading when I was on some of my past committees. I have a hard time like with physical, tangible books at times now. But I also love that like visceral experience of like hearing something. I think it just lands really differently. So I don't know, for like, I was really thinking more of like Satan when I was really getting into this. And one of my favorite like scratchy voice audiobook narrators his name is Will Patton, and he does the Raven Cycle series. And so I'm thinking him for Satan. Like that really drew me in. And just hearing that man's voice in general, like I love his like deep, scratchy voice. So he could probably do the whole thing and it'd be pretty great. I mean, was for the Raven Cycle at least.
Jordan's voice sound real soon.
Yeah.
I also, like Kimmy, listen to mostly audiobooks and I love them. So I like imagining that this would be like a full cast of characters, kind of like the Illuminae Files narration. I really like that with some like effects and stuff. I think that would fit with this story really well.
I would have to agree with that. I think I can't think of, because I don't know a lot of the people who do a lot of the audio readings, and a lot of what I read is actually female readers. But I do think that this would be richer if you got multiple voices to read it, like have somebody for Jordan, somebody for Gabriel, somebody for Michael, and somebody else for Satan. I think that would just make the audiobook way more powerful to have those multiple voices.
And like thinking audio, and again, I like nerd out really hard about audiobooks. Jesse Eisenberg, the actor, did some of Holly Black's books. And he would make a really adorable Jordan, I think. And then also like The Golden Compass became a really excellent audiobook as well, with like that beautiful full cast. So that kind of reminded me of that as well. But now I'm going to be thinking about this for like a while.
Send your submissions into Sarah.
Yes.
Let's see. And I think I have the next question. Did everyone answer that one? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So what emotions did this book evoke in you? So for that one, I always like kind of doing that, like, again, like internal deep dive on anything, because that's just what I do on anything I read. And for me, it just kind of, it really depends, right? Because it's very much tied to me, to the location. So if it's like heaven or hell, it's a lot more of that, like really thinking more about like what we've learned and what we've seen those two places portrayed as through our lives. And then that emotion's kind of tied to that. So maybe hell is something like intriguing, maybe it's something scary. And then same with like heaven, right? Where it's something more like, you know, like white light, everyone's happy, but there is that fight scene. So there's a little bit of that stuff too. And then once you start traveling across the world, different emotions happen there. I know for me, when I get to travel through books, since I love travel so much in life, I get really just excited about it. And it kind of just, I don't know, the like adventurous spirit starts kind of bubbling out as well. And then a lot of the times with Jordan early on, and sometimes a little bit woven throughout, it may be not necessarily sad, but really feel for him just because of what he's gone through. But then it also makes it that much like sweeter when he kind of finds his like makeshift family towards the end as well. So it is a lot. There's a lot of different emotions, which I think speaks really, really well to the story.
Yeah, I think going off that, those were all emotions that I also kind of experienced. The ones that I don't normally experience necessarily in a book format, I definitely like physically felt tired after all their traveling just because of all the connections. I was like, this is exhausting and I'm just sitting here. So that definitely played in. I also like, I think because there was a little bit of humanizing of Satan, especially with Tabitha and it's not Agatha.
Astrid.
Thank you. Was when like Satan first fell, or Samael first fell, you kind of feel a little bad for him, but then you think of all the things he did in heaven, and you're like, yeah, dude, you kind of brought this upon yourself. But then when he talks about and interacts with Lilith and finds out that he basically is heavenly fire, like running through him at all times, I did feel kind of bad for the guy. So I thought it was pretty impressive that despite everything that, we learn about in pop culture about Satan, and as much as we're told not to pity him, that you were able to write it enough that I was at least evoked to some pity on his behalf.
I have to agree with Jenny on that a lot. I ended up almost empathizing with Satan, because when he's Samael, he discovers that maybe the Father's withholding things, and for good reason, from the angels and other beings in heaven. But at the same time, he felt like he was justified to enlighten his fellow brothers and sisters about what he thought was corruption in heaven. And so for him to be punished the way he was, I don't know. I ended up really empathizing with that whole heavenly fire or hellfire that he is consistently feeling all the time as well.
For me, the initial emotion I had when I was just getting the book is it is something. It's part of one of my interests. I love angels. I love angel lore. So I was so excited to get the book. That was my initial thing. And then just going on the roller coaster ride of watching, of getting to know Jordan first, this ordinary kid who gets thrown into this extraordinary situation, and he really has no idea what's going on. Is just, and we're just as clueless as he is, and that's really cool. And then watching the fall, and feeling the disappointment and heartbreak from Gabriel, Samael, and Michael on what's going on is just, you feel that those bonds breaking in the book. And then and then you feel the new family by the end. So it's it's a really nice roller coaster ride of emotion, which you want in a book, or at least I do.
I really liked the pace of it, how fast it moved, and how things, you were just getting sucked in, and then all of a sudden things totally changed, which was almost frustrating because you wanted more of what was just happening. But I like that. I think that's really effective way to move a plot forward and stuff. And I also noticed there's tons of little details that you've placed along the way, like breadcrumbs, and you wonder, is that going to come back later? Is that relevant? And I think there are a lot more of those than we think, and that are going to become more apparent as we read through the series. So I think that is really exciting, because you notice these things and these details that stick out, and you're like, what was that about? And then it doesn't come back to that, and so you're thinking, well, maybe that was just. But no, I'm pretty sure you have a bigger plan for a lot of those little things. So it's really exciting as a reader.
Yes, that's
Easter eggs.
Yes, I feel like a detective trying to pick out the little clues along the way and say, no, there's more to this going to happen. It has to be. And so the excitement of that, and the whole book for me brought up so many things that I just would love to talk about. That's why as soon as I finished it, it was like, could you please read this book so that I can have somebody to talk to about it? And okay, you give it to my son and let him read it so I can have somebody else, and we can talk about all this, because it just, everything I really love to talk about. But, because you're a librarian at work, you can't talk about these things, and, religion, politics, and your opinion is secondary as a librarian. So for me on this book, it's like, I am the fan of reading all this, and you're hitting topics I want to know more about. What's your research? Where did you find that? And it's like, yes, give me more of this. So it was like, I was like a little kid in a candy store reading through this book. So thank you very much. Keep it up. I can't wait for 2. I'm trying not to be a pain or pesty about it, but I know you started writing it, so I'll just be patient and reread this one and write down my little notes next time.
Yeah, thank you. Just to close off the question, I'll just say, I mean, every moment I write, I pretty much feel. I'm kind of like Gabriel in that way. He feels so much, and I feel a lot like that. But yeah, I mean, there's, betrayal and pain and sadness, and I think there's 2 moments where I literally was crying as I was writing because some of it just was, it was super sad, or it just hurt so much. And I we all are lingering on Satan a lot, but I just want to say, like, one of the first scenes that ever came to me was the fall. So there's so much pain and agony and so many emotions wrapped up into that, and to have that be the first moment to come to me and like be what I want to write was just like, it was like total like punch. So yeah, I guess having that like set the stage, like that just set the stage for the rest of the book in terms of what emotions kind of were drawn out and how you kind of feel them even as you're reading.
So I have the next question, which is, did you pick out any themes throughout the book? So one that's obviously going to keep coming up with the idea and the settings of heaven and hell is the idea of good versus evil. But I think it's very interesting with the introduction of Lilith with the story and kind of the little we get so far with the background of Lilith tempting Samael before he became Satan, in terms of, like, is there true good versus true evil? I mean, even the angels who are supposed to be these amazing people, like, ignored a call from their brother. They were like, no, we're good. So I think it definitely sets up that dynamic of, we don't really know what is like true evil or true good at this point.
I think one of the themes that kept on coming through very strongly to me was the idea of family, and that it extends outside of physical and blood bonds, and that, you can pick and choose who you call family, and sometimes those things change, and sometimes you have to change out one person for another, but sometimes who you get into your family is better than who you had to leave behind.
Kind of like a mix of both, I would say. Like, both of those themes also really stuck out to me. Especially like just looking at good and evil. I love stories where you can kind of really question exactly, like, a little bit of what I think it was Jenny was saying of, well, what is good, what is evil? And there's a lot of gray area. There's a lot of gray area no matter what story you're reading or anything like that. And then it kind of takes you into, I think oftentimes in literature, when we look at like angels or even, any other fantastical elements as well, it really makes you look at, well, what it is to be human. And so Jordan's kind of that character that we get that, lens through of, like, we have these angels, but then we also have Jordan, who is, we find out different stuff too about him. But kind of getting those lens of just, what is it to be a human? What is it to be good? What is it to be bad? But maybe it's not being good, or maybe it's not being bad. It's kind of that mix and just what we all have inside us. So I love stories that make me really critique that and look at what that really means and challenges maybe what I even think at this time. And then again, as well as Courtney said with the family, that's something I always gravitate towards in stories, is especially one where you create your own. Because as we know, like, life's a journey and it's not meant to happen alone. And we pick up family along the way. And I think this is a really accurate depiction of that as well.
They literally pick up family. They have to go get everybody.
Exactly.
We're getting back together.
Obviously, phone calls don't work with this family. You have to go and physically grab them to come along. Yeah, that. And I think the power of free will comes up an awful lot, and that is a lot behind that as well. And I know the symbolism and stuff will eventually weave its way through. So all that plus more. There's so much to pick on. It's great. It really is.
I am also drawn to the theme of family, especially because Tabitha and Astrid are sisters, right?
My bad.
So even there's family there. No, even there's family there. So like it's everywhere, and I guess it's everywhere in our lives too. But it makes you think about it in relationship to like the hierarchies and in relationship to heaven, and even father's father. Like, so that's a big part of family. So it makes, I don't know, I just think that's a really strong theme that I keep noticing too.
Well, and for me, I think that the concept of family and the concept of good and evil in a lot of ways are married to each other, because, you know, there's also the idea of betrayal in there as well, and not just from Samael, because he felt betrayed when he realized that he was considered, you know, they could just throw him away. They didn't want to lose Michael, but they could just throw him away. And, you know, and just that the feeling of that, and that's, you know, being betrayed by your family, and leads to, you know, it was supposedly these angelic good beings that did this to him. So was it, yeah, it was free will, but was it really? And just all those questions and ideas in there.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, you pretty much all hit on the important ones. And I mean, with me, it was strange because, I mean, right when I was writing the first book, I really didn't have themes in mind. I just was kind of like writing what I wanted to write. But once it was complete, it was like so apparent how, you know, good and evil and free will and family and the blood became such a one too that I wasn't intending to do that. And even like the secrets and the mystery, like all those became really like prevalent themes. And I mean, going into it, it's not something I thought about, but now definitely those are stuff, you know, going to continue throughout the series.
All right, mine's next. I think everybody answered that. And this is kind of like tightly woven with the last one, I think, about themes, but symbolism is interwoven throughout the story. What symbols did you notice and what might they represent? So this is, again, one of those things that I think there's a lot more of than like one person alone reading it could get their head around. I think it would take multiple rereadings and knowing the whole series to really notice everything, but I'm pretty sure there's like a ton. Obviously the fleur-de-lis and with the Metatron's cube and the spheres, and I know there's significance in like the locations, the feathers, the blood, there's so much to it. So I'm just curious what things other people notice too.
Basically all that. If there's much more symbolism, I don't think I'm aware of it yet, so I'll have to reread. But yeah, there's quite a lot to keep track of, I think.
For me, I noticed a lot of focus on like feathers, like you said, but also like we all learn that each angel has kind of a tie to not only like a specialty in an area, but also they each have their own bird that's associated with them. Obviously the angels have wings, and then part of the recipe for the potion Satan needed to get out of hell was the idea of was a feather. But I think it also, so that kind of ties everything together, but then also the idea of like flying versus falling or flight versus fall, in terms of with wings, like you technically have that ability. But even with the wings, like Satan fell. So again, he's kind of this displaced angel, kind of neither world, even though he's been sentenced to live in hell. So I thought that was really interesting.
I noticed a little numeric symbolism. Obviously 7 is like that divine angelic number. So we've got the 7 angels who are on Earth, and they're spread out across the 6 continents, but technically 7 continents of the world. And then I thought it was interesting because that number is sort of echoed. You have the 6 who are in hell, but if you include Satan, then that's 7 as well. So I just thought,
well, I think it was also really interesting that each of the 7 in the lower 7 were all tied to a deadly sin as well. But we do think of 7 as more of like a lighter magical number. But when you look at this concept that there are 7 deadly sins, it's not only tied to heaven.
Well, you also have the 7 days it took creation, which is the first thing I have connected with Genesis of 7. So that was the first thing that came to mind before the angels started. So a lot of 7s.
I also like that mirror between, and that ties into the themes of good and evil is, they're kind of mirroring each other. And for me, I always love when that happens, because it's looking into either a dark mirror or a light mirror. You can see yourself.
I can add something we haven't talked about, but like Astrid's chants, divinations, whatever you want to call them, definitely totally full of symbolism. And I would say probably a lot of it probably doesn't make sense, but there is a point to it. And but even I would say the way she twists things sometimes, and then even the prophecy itself in the book at the end, I mean, that's also very similar to Astrid's chants and stuff. So there's a lot of symbols in there. That one you kind of know some more about some of those, and then other parts of it are a little mysterious still, but I think all of those will somehow, play out as the story keeps going on.
Was that everybody? All right. Okay, the last question contains spoilers. So if you are not wanting to learn spoilers,
I don't think
don't go away.
Spoiled a lot of things.
Stay with us. To the Facebook Live people, don't go away. Just mute it or sing, because we want you back. But okay, I'm curious about what part of the future of the trilogy you are most curious about. The location of the spheres, the Nephilim, the role of Sophia and the bloodline, who or what is banging in the gate in hell, what is Father's role or plan, and also Naomi, that's another one. Or what's your other question? What's something that you're just like, you cannot wait for that next part? Those were all mine, so I'm just letting you guys think this. I'm curious about all that and more.
Real quick though, I would love to know though, like, not just your questions, but like, what are your, like, who do you think is banging hell? Like, I don't know. Like, do you have any idea? Like, I don't know.
Honestly, I have a feeling that like either one of the sisters or maybe Sophia could be banging in hell, but I don't know. That was my very first thought when that happened, but I don't know why Satan would have either of those options. And then just to answer Missy's question a little bit more, I think I'm very curious to know, because I feel like Father will probably stay out of the picture altogether unless he has a very divine end for it all. But I'm curious if he will play a part at all.
I expressed this curiosity earlier, but I want to know more about the Sanctuarium and kind of what happened to the sisters, and how they just picked up and moved the orphanage, or like if it's moved elsewhere, like what's going on?
I want to know what the Nephilim's ultimate plan is. Like what are they doing? What is their end game? What is their end goal? I mean, I know kind of what the lore is, but I want to know where you're going to take it.
Can we just have the second book?
Yeah.
The role of Sophia in the bloodline, yes, very interested to see where that's going to go. Can't wait. Who's banging at the gate of hell? I did have a few thoughts reading that, but I can't remember what they were now. So when I reread it, I'll try to write a note down. And I want to know about Jordan's father, because there are so many clues left behind with that I'm like itching which way that's going to go. So those are my immediate ones for the next book, if they get answered in the next book.
I have a mistrust of Naomi. I don't know why. That's just my gut feeling, because she seems too good. And I'm like,
It also is kind of curious to know that you bring that up, Missy, because like Jordan gets sent to an orphanage, but like, why wouldn't they send him to live with their best friends next door? So there could be something fishy, or they could be like matchmaking, which could also be happening.
Mm-hmm. I didn't look to the dark side for that one. Now you got me curious. I'm thinking about that now.
I always think of the dark side, even when it's not there.
Any others?
Well, of course, there's Lilith. What was her
Right,
motivation? Like, what is her end game? Like, why did she set this up? Why did she set up an archangel to fall? Like, what did she get out of that? Because she had to have had a reason for why she did that in the first place. So for me, that was one of the biggest neon things that I was really excited about and want to know more about.
I don't know. I have a feeling book 3 is going to be more toward that, though.
I'm sure.
Yeah. I got to wait a little longer on that one.
But still, it's still something is the biggest
Fully
thing.
agree. Yeah.
It's what started everything.
Yes.
Yeah, I was say I'm not. Well, I'm not going to answer.
Don't.
I mean, all I can say is yes. This will all eventually be answered, and there will be a fully formed plan. But yeah, I'm just not going to say more than that.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So if everybody's good, then I'll just I'll wrap up real quick. So let me grab the giveaway winner and do that quickly. See. Okay, so the giveaway winner is Sterling Jennings, and have contact information. So I will reach out and I will get your prize ready. So thank you to all of you for participating, for being on tonight, for all your hard work ahead of time. I appreciate it so much. I hope you guys had fun. And thank you to Bewitching Book Tours for hosting the event and for a great tour this month. And next month, I might have one little live on Instagram, but for the most part, this was like the hoorah with the lives because I gotta get writing. Yeah, so thank you all so much. We didn't have any questions in the comments, but I think we covered a lot of it anyways. And thanks for sticking around for 2 hours. And I hope you all have a great night.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.